Okay, ready for this? We're looking at a study today, get this, that actually tracked eye movements
What?
in humans and apes.
Really?
Yeah, as they watched videos. The goal, to see if our primate cousins, break down events the same way we do,
Interesting.
even without language.
Fascinating.
So the paper is Humans and Great Apes Visually Track Event Roles in Similar Ways.
Okay.
And it's from PLOS Biology,
Uh-huh.
and it's got some really cool findings, I think.
I'm intrigued. This really does challenge, that assumption that this ability to understand who did what to whom
Right.
is uniquely human.
Yeah,
Like, we're talking about a fundamental element of grammar here.
absolutely.
And it seems like the groundwork might be present in our primate relatives.
Yeah, exactly. And they didn't just use any old videos either.
Oh,
They went for this more naturalistic approach, showing chimps, gorillas,
the
orangutans.
whole gang.
Yeah, and humans, all sorts of everyday actions,
Yeah.
grooming, playing, even some mild squabbles over food.
Huh.
Yeah, they wanted to see how attention shifted as the action unfolded, kind of like
Yeah.
peeking into their thought processes.
I see. So using those eye movements as a proxy
Exactly.
for their understanding what they
Yeah.
were seeing. Clever.
Yeah.
And what did they find?
Well, what they found is that both apes and adult humans, they focus their gaze in a very similar way.
Really?
Uh-huh. They both zeroed in on the action,
Okay.
switching attention between, whoever was doing the action and whoever was on the receiving end.
The agent and the patient.
Yes, exactly. The agent and the patient.
In scientific terms.
In scientific terms.
Yeah.
Right.
So even without complex language,
Right.
apes seem to be parsing these events,
It seems so.
figuring out who's playing what role.
Yeah. It kind of makes you wonder if they have some sort of internal monologue going on, like,
Right.
oh, look, Bobo is taking that banana from Lulu drama.
Uh-huh. Right. Well, that's a fun way to think about it.
Yeah.
And it really does highlight how much we still don't know
Oh, for sure.
about their internal experience.
Yeah.
But the shared gaze patterns,
Right.
they do suggest a deeper cognitive connection
Yeah.
that we might assume.
Yeah. Yeah. And it gets even more interesting when you bring food into the equation.
Oh, how so?
Apparently, everyone, humans, apes alike, were totally captivated by whoever snagged the food.
Oh, really?
Like, forget everything else.
Wow.
That's the star of the show.
Huh. That laser focus on the agent when food is involved, that's fascinating.
Right.
It suggests this deep-seated drive
Yeah.
to understand who controls the resources,
Yeah.
which, makes perfect sense from an evolutionary perspective, right?
Oh, totally.
Knowing where the food is and who gets it,
Yeah.
crucial for survival,
Right.
especially in social species.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder if that primal instinct, right, to track who gets what might have actually played a role in the development of language.
Oh, interesting.
Like maybe our ancestors started communicating because they needed to talk about who was hugging all the berries.
Now, that's a thought-provoking idea.
Right.
It connects something as basic as survival instincts to, the incredibly complex
Yeah.
evolution of human communication.
It's crazy.
It's a reminder that even our most sophisticated abilities
Yeah.
may have their roots in those fundamental drives.
Absolutely. But hold on, though. There were some differences between how humans and apes watched these videos, right?
Yeah.
Like, the apes were a bit more easily distracted, weren't they?
Oh, in what way?
They kept glancing at all the background details,
Okay.
while the human adults were laser focused on the action.
Right, you're right.
Yeah.
The apes did spend significantly more time checking out the scenery.
Yeah.
Now, part of that could be because they were captive apes,
Right.
used to a visually stimulating environment.
Yeah.
But there's also a possibility that it's linked to their natural behavior in the wild.
Yeah, because out in the jungle, you can't afford to miss any details, right?
Right.
You need to be constantly aware of potential predators,
Right, food sources.
rivals, everything.
Yeah, all of it.
So maybe that tendency to scan the surroundings is still ingrained in them,
Yeah,
even when they're lounging in a zoo enclosure.
exactly.
Yeah.
Their attention might be wired differently,
Yeah.
tuned to pick up on subtle changes in their environment that we, as humans, might filter out.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a lack of focus,
Right.
but rather a different way of processing the world around them,
Makes sense.
one that's shaped by their evolutionary history.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about the babies? Weren't they all over the place with their attention?
Oh, they were.
Yeah.
The 6-month-old infants in the study mostly ignored the main action and focused on the background details.
Yeah.
They seemed to be fascinated by, seemingly random things,
Yeah, like what?
like a leaf falling or a bird flying in the distance.
It's like they were watching a completely different video than the rest of us.
I know, right?
But I guess their brains are still developing. So maybe they're just not equipped to process those complex interactions yet.
That's likely part of it. They haven't fully developed the cognitive tools to understand,
Yeah.
who's doing what to whom.
Right.
Plus, their world is still so new
Oh, yeah.
and full of wonder.
For sure.
They're constantly bombarded with new sights and sounds,
Right.
and everything is fascinating to them.
So maybe those, quote, irrelevant background details
Right.
are actually helping them learn about their environment,
Yeah.
building a foundation for understanding more complex events later on.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
They might be picking up on all sorts of crucial information about,
Yeah.
object permanence, spatial relationships, and cause and effect. Things that seem obvious to us are still brand new discoveries for them.
It just goes to show you that there's so much more going on
I know.
in those little brains than we realize.
Absolutely. Even though they can't tell us what they're thinking. Their gaze patterns offer a glimpse into their developing understanding
Yeah.
of the world.
So we've got apes who seem to grasp the basics of event roles but get distracted by shiny things, and babies who are still figuring out the whole objects exist even when I can't see them thing.
Uh-huh. Right.
It really makes you appreciate how far we've come as a species, doesn't it?
It does.
But it also raises the question,
Oh.
if apes have these cognitive building blocks,
Yeah.
why haven't they developed language like us?
Right.
What's the missing piece of the puzzle?
That's a question that has puzzled scientists for a long time.
Oh, I bet.
And this study just adds another layer to the mystery.
Yeah.
But stay tuned because we're going to delve deeper into the possible explanations for this evolutionary gap in our next segment.
Ooh, I can't wait.
We'll explore some of the key differences between human and ape communication
Okay.
and what those differences might tell us about the unique trajectory of human language.
I'm excited.
This is going to be good.
I am too.
It's tricky, Studying something as complex as event cognition
Right.
in animals that can't just tell us what they're thinking.
Yeah, it's like trying to figure out
Right.
how a car engine works.
Yeah.
Just by listening to the sounds it makes.
Absolutely.
But this study
Yeah.
had a clever approach
Oh.
using eye tracking.
Clever.
It's like a window into their minds,
Yeah.
showing us what they find important in those videos.
Exactly. And they were very careful
I bet.
to make sure the study was, robust and ethical.
Okay.
They tested 9 great apes,
Okay.
chimps, gorillas, and orangutans, all from the Basel Zoo in Switzerland,
Nice.
with full respect for their well-being.
Good.
And they made sure the apes could leave the study whenever they wanted.
Okay, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
It's so important to treat our animal cousins with respect,
Absolutely.
especially when we're trying to understand their minds.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but how did they actually get the apes to participate? I can't imagine it was easy to convince them to sit still and watch videos.
Well, they used a bit of positive reinforcement,
Okay.
offering diluted sugar-free syrup as a reward,
Okay.
but it was all voluntary.
Right.
The apes could choose whether to participate or not.
Gotcha.
And to compare their responses, they also tested adult humans
Okay.
and 6-month-old infants
Oh, wow.
recruited from the University of Zurich.
So they had a good mix of ages and species then
They did.
to get a broader picture of how different brains process these events.
Exactly.
But tell me more about the videos themselves.
Sure.
What kind of scenes did they show?
So they used 84 short video clips,
Okay.
ranging from a few seconds to about 10 seconds long.
Oh, okay.
And remember, these
Yeah.
weren't staged lab videos.
Right.
They show footage of apes in both zoos and the wild,
Cool.
doing, everyday ape things,
Right.
grooming, playing, using tools, eating, you name it. They even included some footage of those mild squabbles we talked about earlier.
So there was some real-life ape drama in there.
There was.
I bet that kept them interested.
It did.
But they did the same thing for the humans, right? Showed them videos of everyday human activities.
Exactly.
Okay.
They filmed humans in a more controlled setting.
Okay.
But the actions themselves were similar,
Like what?
like helping, object manipulation,
Mm-hmm.
even some playful roughhousing.
Oh, okay.
The goal was to make sure the actions were comparable across species,
Right.
so they could really see how each group processed the same types of events.
Okay, and they kept the video silent, right?
Yes.
No distracting sound effects or anything.
Exactly. They wanted to focus purely on visual attention,
Right.
how the eyes moved as the action unfolded.
Makes sense.
Any sounds could have influenced their gaze patterns,
Sure.
and they wanted to isolate the visual processing of those events.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's dive into those gaze patterns. We talked about the overall similarities,
Yeah.
but were there any specific findings that stood out?
There were.
Oh, boy.
One fascinating pattern
Mm-hmm.
emerged when they looked at the difference
Okay.
between animate and inanimate patients.
So what do you mean?
When the agent was acting on another being
Okay.
versus acting on an object.
Right, like the difference between a chimp taking a banana from another chimp
Yes.
and a chimp poking a stick with that banana.
Exactly.
Huh.
And what they found is that when the agent was acting on an inanimate object, like this stick in your example,
Right.
all species, humans and apes alike,
Yeah.
were much quicker to identify the agent.
So if a chimp was poking a stick, everyone's eyes immediately went to the chimp.
Right.
Like, okay, that's the one doing something.
Exactly.
But it wasn't as clear-cut when both the agent and the patient were alive.
Correct.
Uh,
There was still a tendency to look at the agent first,
okay.
but it wasn't as pronounced.
Interesting.
It's like our brains might have some built-in assumption
Uh-huh.
that actions are usually initiated by living beings.
Makes sense.
A stick isn't going to just move on its own,
Right.
so someone must be making it move.
Right.
But when you have two beings interacting,
Yeah.
it might take a moment to figure out who's the initiator,
Yeah.
who's driving the action.
Exactly. And these were dynamic scenes too, right?
They were.
So the roles could shift slightly as the interaction unfolded.
Absolutely.
Imagine two chimps playing. They might take turns being the chaser and the chased, and our eyes have to keep up with those changes.
Right. It's like watching a tennis match.
Yeah.
Your eyes dart back and forth
Yeah,
as the players volley the ball.
exactly.
So it's not just about identifying the agent.
Right.
It's about understanding the relationship between the individuals
Yeah.
and how that relationship might change over time.
Absolutely. There's a whole layer of social complexity there
There is.
that comes into play when both the agent and patient are animate.
Exactly.
Now, what about that difference we talked about earlier, with the apes being more interested in background details than the human adults? Was there any more insight into that?
Yes, you'll remember the apes
Yeah.
spent significantly more time looking at all those background details,
Yeah.
while the human adults were laser focused on the main action.
It's like they couldn't resist checking out what else was going on in the scene,
I know.
even if it wasn't directly related to the main event.
Right, now we talked about how part of that could be
Yeah.
because captive apes are used to a visually stimulating environment.
Right.
But there's another fascinating possibility.
What's that?
It could be that they find those background details
Yeah.
more inherently interesting than we do.
Really? What makes you think that?
Well, think about how apes experience the world.
Okay.
They're incredibly tactile.
Hmm.
They touch everything,
Yeah.
manipulate objects, interact with their environment in a very physical way.
That's true. They're not just passively observing like we often do.
Right.
They're constantly exploring and engaging with their surroundings.
Exactly. So maybe their visual attention
Yeah.
is also tuned to those finer details
Okay.
because they're always looking for opportunities to interact with things,
Yeah.
even if it's just a leaf or a pebble.
Interesting.
It's like their brains are saying,
Yeah.
hey, what could I do with that?
That's such an interesting perspective. It's
Yeah.
like they see the world as this giant playground
Right.
full of possibilities.
Yeah.
While we're more focused on the specific task at hand.
It really challenges our assumptions about what it means to pay attention.
For sure.
What we might consider distraction could actually be a valuable way for them to gather information about their environment.
And it makes you wonder if our modern lifestyles, staring at screens all day,
Right.
filtering out distractions,
Yeah.
might be changing how our brains process information.
Totally.
Maybe we're losing some of that natural curiosity and attentiveness
Right.
to the world around us.
That's a profound thought and definitely something worth pondering.
For sure.
But let's not forget about the 6-month-old babies in the study.
Oh, right.
They were
right.
practically glued to the background, weren't they?
They were.
Almost like they were watching a completely different video
I know.
than everyone else.
It's like those main events were completely irrelevant to them.
I know, but they're still so young.
Right.
Their brains are still developing those complex cognitive skills.
Yeah.
Exactly. They haven't yet mastered those abilities
Right.
to understand who's doing what to whom.
Yeah.
Still figuring out how the world works.
Yeah.
And those seemingly irrelevant details
Mm-hmm.
might actually be crucial for them.
Like, what? What could they possibly be learning from staring at a leaf blowing in the wind?
Well, think about the developmental milestones
Oh,
they're going through.
yeah.
At that age, they're learning about object permanence,
Uh-huh.
the idea that things still exist
Yeah.
even when you can't see them.
Right.
So maybe they're looking for clues, that those objects haven't just vanished into thin air.
So maybe those distractions are actually helping them build a mental map of their environment,
Exactly.
understanding how things move and interact.
Precisely.
It's amazing how much information they're processing.
I know.
Even if they're not consciously aware of it,
Yeah.
it's like they're learning by osmosis.
It really is.
Those first few months
Right.
are a period of incredible learning and development.
Totally.
And even though they're not parsing events like adults,
Right.
they're laying the foundation for those more complex cognitive skills.
Exactly.
So in a way, their focus on the background is a sign that their brains are working overtime to make sense of the world.
Precisely. It's not a lack of attention.
Right.
It's a different kind of attention.
Uh-huh.
One that's driven by the specific needs of that stage of development.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that we shouldn't underestimate the cognitive abilities
Yeah.
of even the youngest humans.
We've covered a lot of ground here, talking about how differently humans and apes watch and process events.
We have.
But we still haven't tackled that big question.
The big one.
If apes have these cognitive building blocks for language,
Yeah.
why haven't they evolved language like us?
Ah, yes, the million-dollar question.
Right.
And this study really just adds to the mystery,
Yeah.
but it also gives us some intriguing clues.
Oh.
It suggests that the answer might lie in the subtle but crucial differences
Okay.
between human and ape communication.
So what are those differences? What sets human language apart from the way apes communicate?
That's what we'll explore in our next segment.
Ooh, exciting.
We'll delve into those key differences
Okay.
and what they might reveal about the unique path
Mm-hmm.
that led to the evolution of human language.
You know, it's crazy to think that, like, for centuries we considered language this, like, defining
Yeah.
feature of being human.
Yeah.
The thing that sets us apart from
Yep.
all other animals.
Right.
And now we're seeing that the foundation for language
Right.
may be much more widespread than we thought.
It really does challenge those long-held assumptions, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The more we delve into,
Uh-huh.
you know,
Yeah.
the cognitive abilities of other species,
Right.
the more we realize that the line between,
Yeah.
you know, us and them
Yeah.
isn't so clear-cut.
Exactly. We've seen that apes can grasp the concept of who did what to whom, even without complex language.
Right.
So what's the missing piece?
Right.
Why haven't they taken that leap to symbolic communication like we have?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is.
It's like they have the ingredients, but not the recipe.
Yeah.
They understand the basics
Right.
of event roles,
Uh-huh.
but they haven't figured out how to translate those concepts
Yeah.
into a system of abstract symbols and grammar.
Okay, so let's unpack that.
Okay?
What are some of the key differences between human language and the way apes communicate that might explain this gap?
One crucial difference
Yeah.
is something called displacement,
Okay.
the ability to talk about things that aren't physically present in that moment.
Right.
You can talk about your plans for the weekend,
Uh-huh.
even though it's only Tuesday,
Yeah.
or reminisce about your childhood,
Yeah.
even though you're all grown up now.
So that ability to detach our communication from the here and now,
Exactly.
it gives us the power to, like, think abstractly,
Yeah.
to plan for the future, to share stories about the past. It's like our minds can travel through time.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that seems to be something that's largely absent
Okay.
in ape communication.
Really?
Yeah. They tend to communicate about things that are immediately relevant
Okay.
to their current needs and desires.
Like what?
Like, I'm hungry, there's danger,
Uh-huh.
let's play, things like that.
Yeah, so it's like their communication is grounded in the present moment,
Right.
while ours can soar through time and imagination.
Exactly.
I like that.
Another key difference is productivity.
Okay.
The ability to create an infinite number of new sentences
Right.
from a limited set of words and grammatical rules.
Wow.
We can constantly invent new ways of expressing ourselves,
Yeah.
even if we've never heard those specific combinations of words before.
It's like we have this mental language toolbox,
Right.
and we can use it to build all sorts of
Things.
new and creative expressions.
Human language is incredibly
Yeah,
flexible and creative.
it is.
We can talk about anything we can imagine,
Yeah.
even things that have never existed before.
Right.
Apes, on the other hand,
Mm-hmm.
seem to have a much more
Yeah.
limited repertoire
Yeah.
of vocalizations and gestures.
So their communication is more like
Right.
a set of pre-programmed responses,
Right.
while ours is constantly evolving and adapting.
Exactly.
And I imagine the complexity of our grammar also plays a role, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Human languages have all
Yeah.
sorts of intricate rules about word order, verb tenses,
Uh-huh.
the relationships between words.
Yeah.
These rules allow us to create sentences that are not only meaningful, but also grammatically correct.
It's like the difference between
Right.
building a simple structure with blocks
Yeah.
and constructing a complex architectural masterpiece.
That's a great analogy.
Thanks.
And while ape communication
Yeah.
might convey basic information,
Yeah.
it lacks those intricate layers of syntax
Right?
that give human language
Yeah.
its power and nuance.
So it seems like the evolution of human language involved a whole bunch of factors coming together.
It did.
The ability to think abstractly, to combine words in creative ways,
Yes.
to structure sentences with complex grammar.
All of it.
It's like our brains developed a whole new operating system for communication.
It really is a remarkable achievement.
It is.
And while we still don't have all the answers about how it happened,
Yeah.
studies like this one
Yeah.
give us valuable clues.
Yeah.
By comparing our abilities to those of our primate cousins,
Right.
we can start to piece together
Yeah.
the evolutionary puzzle of language.
This has been a really
It has.
incredibly thought-provoking
Yeah.
deep dive.
For sure.
We've seen that the roots of language
Yeah.
may be much deeper than we once thought,
Right.
but we've also gained, I think, a new appreciation
I think so too.
for the unique complexity and power
Right.
of human communication.
It's fascinating to think about how these subtle but crucial differences
Yeah.
in our cognitive abilities
Yeah.
have had such a profound impact
For sure.
on the course of our evolution.
Well, on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive.
I think we have.
We've explored those surprising similarities
Right.
and fascinating differences between how humans and apes process the world.
We have.
And we've pondered the enduring mysteries of language evolution.
Absolutely.
It's been a real pleasure exploring this with you. And as always, we leave our listeners with more questions than answers, but hopefully we've sparked your curiosity and given you a new perspective on what it means to be human.
And perhaps inspired you to ponder the amazing diversity of intelligence and communication
For sure.
in the natural world.
So until next time, keep those brains buzzing, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.
See you then.